And welcome to another Mark Bishop Show. Well, due to the COVID-19, nearly 45 million Americans are having serious financial discussions with family members for the first time. Now, the pandemic has impacted people's attitudes on financial conversations and health decisions. You know, 1/3 of U.S. adults had a conversation with close family members about their end-of-life plans and preferences. Now, that's according to a new study from financial services firm Edward Jones in partnership with Age Wave and the Harris Poll. So for 44.5 million Americans, which is like 18%, this was the first time they had discussions about finances, health, and legal plans. So my special guest is Alison Carnie, Principal, Edward Jones Trust Company. Welcome, Alison.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Well, folks, Alison will be kind enough to share additional results from the survey, address the gap between the intention and action when it comes to estate and end-of-life planning, and offer us some tips on how to ensure your legacy is secure for your family. The pandemic, Alison, it's made many Americans think more about the kind of legacy they want to leave their families. So, however, this study has also found that people have been slow to take the necessary steps to put those plans into place. What say you?
You're absolutely right, Mark. There is definitely a gap between the conversations that are taking place and people knowing that they need to have these conversations, and then actually sitting down with their financial advisor and their estate planning attorney and putting the plans in place, putting pen to paper and signing on the dotted line. So absolutely, there is a huge gap between intention and action. So, just to kind of highlight that a little bit more, there are three essential end-of-life documents for most people to have in place: a will, a medical directive, and a power of attorney. And only 19% of adults age 50 or older have all three of those in place. So to your point, we've got folks that are talking about end-of-life plans for the first time, which is great, but we've only got a very small percentage of Americans who have really actually executed on those plans. So there's some work to be done out there, that's for sure.
Well, looking at the some of the stats, the results, a majority of Americans ages 50 plus, 71% believe having a will in place is the most important action to take before someone dies, yet only 49% actually have a will. And only 19% of adults 50 plus have the three essential end-of-life documents that you touched on. But more than half of Americans, 51%, do not have any long-term care plans in place. So, that's a bit scary.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that there's just a lot of barriers to having the conversations. I think the pandemic has spurred more discussion and has caused or allowed for more openness and willingness to talk about some of these things. But I think for many folks, there's just roadblocks when it comes to talking about end-of-life plans. And since we've got these roadblocks like avoiding family conflicts, we don't want to burden anybody, we don't want to be uncomfortable in these discussions. These roadblocks then are preventing conversations that are needed and are therefore also preventing us from taking action. There are a lot of things that Americans need to be thinking about and doing in order to leave an orderly and organized estate behind for their loved one.
Well, Alison Carnie, with these results, were they surprising to you?
For the most part, this matches up with what we see anecdotally. There are Americans out there that are great at putting these plans in place and very committed to making sure that they stay up to date. But for the majority, it's just really tough to have these conversations and take action. I would say, Mark, one of the most surprising statistics that came through the survey results is the one around 53 million Americans wish their parents and in-laws did a better job of managing their money. So what that says to me is that these conversations in some ways are welcome. So mom and dad might feel nervous about having a conversation with adult children about finances and end of life planning. But guess what? Those adult children are concerned about their parents' money and finances. And so I think that that could take some of the pressure off mom and dad and really open the door to additional conversations taking place.
Yeah, well, okay. So what are some ways for Americans to start having these conversations around end-of-life health and financial considerations with their families? What do you recommend?
Well, it's a matter of kind of getting your thoughts together, first and foremost. And in order to do that, I encourage folks to think about what's most important. What is most important to you? And our study shows that most people would answer family. So think about then what would happen to your family if you have no plans in place. Would your kids or loved ones know what to do?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that folks don't necessarily realize or think about is if you don't have a plan for where your assets go when you pass away, the state actually has a plan for you. And this really might not line up with your wishes. It might not be what you want to see happen.
No.
And so I just say use that as motivation. To really sit down and think about some things, think about what you want your legacy to be. And I would also encourage folks to talk with their financial advisor about these things. Your financial advisor knows you and knows your family, knows the dynamics of your family, and also understands your financial situation. And I'll say, Mark, family and finances are two huge inputs into leaving a well-organized and well-thought-out end-of-life plan behind.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea that kids get involved. I mean, let's face it, lazy today, expect everything in the now, and had no clue what you went through to leave them what you're going to leave them. So I think it's a darn good idea that they get involved and sit down with you and appreciate what's coming. And to do that, of course, if you go to Edward Jones, folks, www.edwardjones.com, a lot of information on that, a lot of stuff. If you haven't done half of what Alison's been talking about, you need to. In this day and age, you need to, I tell you. And there's everything on that site, right?
Yes, there's a lot of information, not just about this study, but also just about some of the general estate planning or end-of-life planning considerations to help you feel a bit more educated on the topic before you talk with your financial advisor or even an estate planning attorney.
Mm-hmm. So let's just go back a little bit. What are, again, please, the three most essential end-of-life documents that one should really have in place? And what do they do?
Yeah, so those three documents, and I guess I'll preface that they can vary from person to person, from state to state, of course. But in general, the three documents are a will, a medical directive, and a power of attorney document. So the will, let's start there. That's sometimes called a last will and testament. Mm-hmm. And really, it's a pretty basic document that outlines who gets what when you pass away, and also who's going to be in charge of all of that. Your executor or your personal representative is sometimes called. For folks that have minor children, oftentimes your will is where you have an opportunity to name a legal guardian for your children if that need should ever arise. So very, very important document.
Okay.
Next is that medical directive. Sometimes this is called a living will or a healthcare declaration. It goes by a few different names. And really, it's a document that outlines what kind of care you do or don't want in the event you're in some sort of persistent vegetative state. Of course, something no one wants to think about, but something we should plan for. And last is that power of attorney document. So this is a document that is going to allow you to name someone to step into your shoes to make medical and financial decisions for you in the event you can't make those important decisions for yourself. Maybe you're incapacitated or just otherwise indisposed, and you need to, select a responsible person to make those decisions on your behalf. So that's the document where you would do that. Well
put. Well, they're the three, folks, and a lot more information for you again is www.edwardjones.com. They've been around for donkey's years. They know their business well and truly, and they can help you and they care. My special guest on the Mark Bishop Show, and thank you, Alison, again for giving up your time, Alison Carnie, Principal, Edward Jones Trust Company. You take it easy over Christmas and Godspeed, okay?
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it.